Good morning, everyone. So I'm delighted to be moderating a panel on growing the VIP taxi, yacht, and sightseeing markets. I will let my fellow panelists introduce themselves, but we are going to talk about making helicopters mainstream, the reality of urban air mobility. We're going to ask 3 questions, and I'll let you guys introduce yourself.
Good morning, thank you very much. Neil Sierens, Deputy Chief Pilot at Starspeed Helicopters, UK-based company owned by Lux Aviation, but with a sort of global footprint. Mostly it's VIP corporate aviation, specifically yachts, in our growth area.
Morning everybody, I'm Frederic Aguettant from Helipass, digital platform for booking helicopters for sightseeing, charter and on-demand.
Good morning, Nigel Watson. I'm the owner of Luviair. We've been operating in the VIP market for close to 20 years. Core business is principally the luxury yachting industry, but we operate principally out of London, south of France and the Caribbean.
Good morning all, Nitin, Sareen from Airbus Corporate Helicopters, ACH.
Thanks, Jen. So thinking about the VIP taxi, yacht, and sightseeing markets, can you give me your opinions as to how these markets are structured and how they fit in within the global helicopter market?
So maybe I can start with some broad numbers. When you look at the subject today, you're talking VIP or private and business aviation segment. You're talking yachting, which is kind of a niche within the private and business aviation segment of the helicopter industry. And then you're talking taxi. You can extend that taxi to maybe commercial transport, and then you're talking heli-tourism or sightseeing. So if you look at the numbers, broad numbers of the fleet in service across all those segments, there's approximately 5,000 in-service helicopters for private and business aviation use today. There's about just north of 2,000 taxi and commercial transport or charter, as we call it, and I'm not including oil and gas in that. And there's 400 to 500 part-time or full-time sightseeing, heli-tourism helicopters in use. So you add all those numbers up, you're talking 7,500 helicopters out of a total of about 25,000, 26,000 civil and parapublic turbine helicopters that are in the fleet, or 30%. So you're talking a significant chunk when you talk about these 3 segments.
Anyone else?
Well, I think I'm going to be the more negative one, so do you guys want to say some positive things? You go first.
I can talk about the aviation on the yachting side, on the super yachting side, which absolutely Nigel will definitely back me up with his experience on this. We've seen the number of super yachts with helidecks over the last 4 years. In terms of 4 years ago, we had 3% of super yachts with helidecks. We're now at sort of 6%. I think in Starspeed that's been reflected the fact that we've gone from 20 pilots 5 years ago, 6 years ago, to almost 80 pilots now, and the rest of the company's growing with it. So we're seeing a huge growth in that field.
Okay, I'll take that. I think that when I looked at the title here and started thinking about this, I was unfortunately, like many of us, over at Heli Expo and walking in the California hills when Kobe Bryant got killed. And I was surprised not by the fact that, well, I was surprised by all the people around me that had nothing to do with helicopters and immediately picked up on the fact that somebody had died in a VIP accident. That for us in the industry is obviously what keeps me awake at night, trying to keep the VIP sector and landing on boats and by day, by night, as safe as possible. And it's an area that worries me. I think that the other part that I was reflecting upon was we recently had a sort of number of conversations with what I would call very young, ultra-high net worth individuals who are looking at the whole helicopter model. And to my surprise, a few. We are, remember, a tiny industry, a tiny niche within this industry. We're actually looking at the environmental impact of what they were doing, looking at carbon offsetting their operation, and really, in some cases, actually downsizing their fleet. They were somewhat established, they had sort of multiple jets, multiple helicopters, etc. But it was a sign. If you look at the very, and they were all running, the Amazons of this world and the WhatsApps of this world, the very biggest companies in the world. But the young guys that are running this at the very top, they're reflecting on this, they're reflecting upon the impact of what we do daily, and some of them making decisions which are creating a different trend, which perhaps I have always anticipated, but I don't see it as growth. Neil's absolutely right. I mean, on a global scale, evidence of Starspeed is such that there has been growth, and there always will be, but we're such a tiny sector. We're such a tiny part of it. So I'm in a neutral position as far as growth in my particular sector is concerned. It'll grow steadily, but it won't impact the rest of your world sitting out there. And for those of us that do it on a daily basis, the overriding requirement is, don't let it happen on my watch. I don't want that call in the middle of the night that something's gone down in the Caribbean.
Right. So thanks for transitioning to that. And actually, I think this is the most important subject on this panel. So what the development avenues that you're seeing and the risks and the barriers to future growth, and maybe Frederic, you can start on that.
Yeah, our focus is on the sightseeing market first, and after transfer and on demand. But there is a mass market of 6 million passengers per year around the world doing just a small trip, $200, and flying around at their destination. And for me, it's very important because this is an engagement to use helicopter, to understand helicopter without problem of accident and noise and something like that. And it's every year 6 million passengers, not the same. So it's a lot at the end. And the second thing is that definitely there is a barrier of accident and noise, but also there is some opportunities with the digitalization of the business, like when you take your plane or your train or your hotel yesterday or this morning, it's the same use, and now you can do that for the helicopter, and at the end put the transfers on between airport and city. So this is the way to grow the market, definitely. And at the end, there is 3 numbers. For private owners, they fly around worldwide 150 hours a year. On-demand flights, they fly around 260 hours a year for one helicopter. And sightseeing, 750 hours a year per helicopter.
Nitin, is the impact of climate change going to kill the helicopter tourism market?
Well, actually, on the contrary, if you look at the carbon footprint and if you look at some of the players in the urban air mobility space today, they are pitching that the carbon footprint utilizing helicopters with a full load of passengers on a helicopter flight is less than an Uber cab ride across the town. So, and there's obviously, if you scale it up, you're talking obviously some challenges that need to be overcome, and that's where there's work being done today at Airbus group level and across other OEMs as well in terms of learning and advancing the technology. So certainly there will be a transition in the future as we look at scaling up this, but we see already with what has been tested and tried, like Airbus group level, you guys know already that we ran 2 successful technological demonstrators, both the Vahana and the City Airbus, where we're learning through these platforms, and we're going to be adapting for the future in terms of the kind of vehicles, eVTOL vehicles or whatever you call it, for the future. So it will be tackled, but we don't think it will be a major bottleneck area.
Nigel.
Infrastructure. I think this is one of my big issues. Where can we land these things? This is always a conversation that we constantly have, whether it's private ownership or in the tour business environment. This is great. I've got to this point in my life where I can buy this machine that's going to revolutionize the way I live. I'll land in my back garden, and then we'll pop it downtown, and we'll do the same in the evening, and it'll all be fine. And the reality is that's getting harder and harder to do, because everybody who has a garden that can take a helicopter has got a neighbour that doesn't necessarily like helicopters. And as a consequence, you're in this position, well, we can all afford helicopters here, and why are you the noisy guy next to me? I don't need that on a Sunday afternoon on the Captain Tibes or in Saint-Tropez. And that's something which both of us face on a daily basis. It's delighted to take this charter from A to B, but where is B? That's going to be challenging. And I think this tour bit, you see, I'm Mr. Negative on this panel, and this is 20 years of doing it and hoping that there might be another 20. But the perception of tour flying as such, and I'm afraid it does go down to high-profile accidents, etc. Looking up into the sky and saying, well, that's a helicopter and I heard that you can die in one of those things. Link that to noise, link that to disturbance, and I'm not as optimistic on the tour side as possible. If you're Blue Hawaii and you're flying on, around mountains in Hawaii, it may be a little easier. If you're in downtown New York, I think it's more challenging. And where can you land in London? Battersea, Vauxhall at a push, but under what circumstances? Where can you land in Paris? Big centres there. I think infrastructure is a prime thing. We're not all like Sao Paulo, Brazil. And I don't think actually we ever will be. And the whole point of this carbon footprint business, I think, is massively important. And I'm not quite as optimistic there. I think that the projects of the past, and I'm no expert on this, and I'm quite looking forward to the next conference to try and go and learn a bit more about this, because I think this is the future. It's the way. It's what are the helicopter companies going to do in terms of developing these products? But not only that, I think it's when you look at the Bezoses of this world, the Amazons of this world, those guys have got the resources to develop the type of vehicles which will start delivering pizzas and body parts and whatever else you want to deliver, and they will evolve from that. But I think within, 20, 30 years, which again is pushing my longevity, but within that time frame, we're going to get closer to something which has to be more carbon neutral.
Right, so if yachting segment of the market is important for the OEM, they're going to have to find technology integration that actually satisfies the client, right? Because I think you were saying earlier that you're starting to see some of the high net worth trim down their fleet of vehicles because they're concerned about the appearance that this fleet has on their reputation, right? And so there's no question there. But what about sustainable aviation fuel? I mean, are you seeing that as something that's like a conversation topic with some of your high net worth?
I mean, I think there's 2 points. I think on the first part, okay, we shouldn't get overly excited. I'm not talking about hordes of billionaires turning up at your door saying they're going to downgrade. But the point is that 1 or 2, 3 within something like a San Francisco Bay sector, the Bay Area there, as soon as those guys start thinking about it, everybody else tends to at least raise it up on their radar. Alternative fuel systems, I don't think I can really comment on at all. I mean, what I was staggered by, and I know it's a slightly tongue-in-cheek thing, this is that, if you look at the Tier 1 development of the electric power supply to the R44 that's been done over in the States, if you look at the seaplane businesses that are flying out of British Columbia, which have gone all electric on a Twin Otter or something similar to that. So, it's possible. There are people there that have been passionate about this. Thank you.
It doesn't fly more than an hour. You're talking about Alice, right? By the way,
The Alice is the Israeli Alice in Wonderland, the Israeli project. Yeah.
by the way, Louisa and Al run a great conference called Revolution.Aero. If any of you are interested to really drill down in this on this subject.
Yeah, exactly. And the point is, they don't go far enough. We understand that, you know. But I think even when you sort of hear airlines looking at alternative power sources for their short-haul flights, then I haven't read anything so far that can get their head around long-haul flights. But when they're looking around short-haul flights and then looking about a mixture of engines within a four-engined aircraft, such that one or two of them are actually running off electricity, then which is your company, then it starts to get interesting. But again, it's not for today. It's not for tomorrow. It's what's going to happen, hopefully in the not too distant future. And I think, if you're looking with 2020 now, you're looking at Norway saying that they're going to have one of their commuter airlines all operating electrically by 2040. When you look at a state fund like Norway's got, maybe they will.
I want to get back to eVTOL in a second with Frederic, but Niels, is Lux Aviation talking about sustainable aviation fuel?
Definitely paying an interest. I don't know too much about the wider side with regards to the fixed wing side. For us, I think our clients, when they're riding around on these super yachts, which are burning literally tens of thousands of tons of oil per year on the super yacht, the usage of fuel on the helicopter, which, as Nigel says, they're using sort of maybe for 100 hours a year, is sort of minimal in comparison. So Lux Aviation, yes, is looking at it. Obviously, we'll sort of see what the larger companies are doing first.
I think sorry, Neil, if you want to, carbon offset as a program within the luxury yachting industry has been going at least for the last 10, 15 years. You've been able to invest in that. Now I see that they're looking into the helicopter side as well. I did some maths on my fleet in terms of what we offset, and it's a lot of money. We're chucking out a lot of CO2. So we have to get our owners engaged in that to be a part of the solution as opposed to the problem.
And this is focused on airlines, and it's only 2%. So I think at the end it's not a full issue. It's a very visible issue that you need to take care of your environment when you take a train or a plane. But at the moment it's the plane, but it's only 2 or 3% of the system. So for example, your message on the internet is 3-4% per year. So there is more impact on that.
Frederic, are we dreaming about vertiports? Will autonomous urban air mobility, it's 100 years away, right?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of things, and in the next 10 years, you can see something flying really, and you can buy your seat or fly with it. But
next 10 years?
Yeah, I think in the next 10 years.
Nigel, you seem skeptical.
Yeah.
Well, 100 years, forget it. That's way too late. That's just not even worth talking about. 10, I think, is a bit extravagant. 20, I would say, because there seems to be some evidence written out there that people with the resources and the wherewithal are going to be driven towards it. So I think that, I'm 62 on my 82nd birthday. I hopefully have a ride in one of those things. That would be good.
I was speaking to Frederic earlier actually about, I think, exciting places where urban air mobility has a chance. We're talking about the sort of south coast of France, because the problem with urban air mobility is it's over urban areas, and there's that NIMBY sort of approach of I don't want that around me, I don't want that risk, I don't want that noise, whereas over sea areas, and we even talked about Toronto Bay and places like that, where actually these, as a sort of test bed, these aircraft can be flying over water, keeping the noise, the potential damage impact away from everyone else. Those are the sort of first exciting places to be looking at.
Right. Nitin, anything you want to add?
So, as far as Airbus Group is concerned, we believe, already there's a lot of skepticism in the room when it comes to forecasting. So I don't want to pinpoint the number of years it'll take for you to have an autonomous eVTOL vehicle flying. But if you look at today's market, you look at Sao Paulo was mentioned, Mexico City. There's a few other places where you are seeing, using helicopters and the technology that is available today, you're seeing more and more taxi, ride share sort of concept growing. And we see at an Airbus group level a lot of potential there. And this is a very, very important phase for not just for Airbus, but all OEMs, all stakeholders in the helicopter industry, for us to really learn from it, for us to improve. Infrastructure was talked about. For me, another big piece in terms of the buying is the city planners and the public administration, their willingness. And there we are seeing also a lot of interest from the emerging countries. Perhaps London or New York City, because they are very well developed. There is not the chance for you to adapt and adjust the existing infrastructure. But some of the other, China is going through right now a challenge, but if you look at some of the cities, Shenzhen and the Greater Bay Area, there's a lot of talk around building the infrastructure. I wouldn't go as far as vertiports and everything, but I mean, look at Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo was not created overnight. They worked on it over the past 5-10 years. That's why you have 200 plus helipads there, 450 helicopters that fly every day, 3 helicopter centers, all spread in 3 different areas of the city. And that's what makes urban air mobility work. So there's a lot of pieces. But from Airbus point of view, we believe that today's urban air mobility is dependent on helicopters. Tomorrow, it will be for eVTOLs. We hope certainly we go that way. But we've got to, as an industry as such, we have to focus on this area of the helicopter industry as well. So every time helicopter industry is talked about in all forums, oil and gas is discussed at great lengths. But like I just said, 30% of the active turbine helicopter fleet is these segments. So we should all collectively focus on those as well.
Right. So last question: as this technology matures and comes to market and matures, and do you think the legacy operators, or most of the legacy operators, will be wiped out? Or in other words, can the legacy operators adopt the technology and make it rise within their markets?
We certainly see the operators of today being part of the urban air mobility landscape of the future. There is no doubt in our mind at an OEM level, and I think my colleagues from other OEMs in the room will agree. It cannot be done by university kids that are developing these little drones, autonomous drones. It has to be done by experienced people that know how vertical lift works, and vertical lift of today is helicopters, like I said. So, and that is why we are engaging with operators all across the globe to find B2C kind of business models that we can help them grow. Because this is like the first real taste. If you want to scale this up tomorrow, like for example, if I look back, my first flight in a helicopter was a sightseeing flight. That's when I was a teenager or something that I got into a helicopter first time. Then, if you look at it from an ultra high net worth individual point of view, they start with maybe sightseeing. Then, if they get comfortable, they see the utility, they look at chartering a helicopter. Then, as the utilization goes up, the chartering can perhaps in certain areas become a part ownership of a helicopter. And then eventually someone may try at owning a helicopter. Some people, ultra high net worth guys, start with a piston engine, others start with turbine engines, and then they scale it up. So really if you look at this whole story, there is a connect between all these 3 segments in urban mobility of the future. And we hope that the operators, Luviair, Lux Aviation Helicopters, and all of the others look at this segment because there's no other way for us to grow it in the future otherwise, without their experience and know-how.
Yeah, because the eVTOL is an highlight of the market, of a new market, but now it starts with helicopter first. So you have something like 10 to 20 years to develop transfers, new activities on the eVTOL image.
I think, I'm not sure, legacy operators, VIP sector, that makes me a legacy operator, doesn't it? This sounds a bit weird. I thought I was a startup still. I think, one, we don't own any assets. We just manage and look after other people's machines. So we're different to what I would call legacy operators in all the other sectors. So from that point of view, we're completely dependent on the nuances of the principals. As long as they stay engaged, as long as they feel it's a safe and secure way of moving between A and B, then I think they will transition through technology, and they will buy whatever is the newest and the best. Interestingly, actually, in my the last few months talking to them, they want to see technology established before they want to jump into it. They're not willing to be the first, if you like. And there's one who was by number 323 of my jets. It means there's plenty on the market flying around before I actually invest in it. And I think to a degree it's similar with helicopters. They want to see the technology, they like the technology. Well, one of the things that it's a bit of a passionate soapbox for me, and I won't call it the weak link, because it's the most critical part of my business, but the guys that fly the machines for us, their training and maintaining that training and making them aware, or just letting them keep up to date of the tech on board these machines is absolutely critical. I have an iPhone in my hand and an Apple Watch on my wrist, and I probably know how to use about 20-30% of both of them. Take that into the helicopter world, there is so much capability with these machines, and even though type ratings are what they are, simulated time is what it is, it's incredibly difficult to maintain the currency and the knowledge of these aircraft when actually we fly them so little. Maybe you'd like to comment on that?
Absolutely right, Nigel. Spot on. Our pilots, especially when they're overseas in the middle of the Pacific or somewhere with their clients, they are at the front of house, they are the aviation managers, they're doing everything. The easiest bit of their job is flying the aircraft. So obviously that's their qualification by background, but actually once they've got into the aircraft and they're doing the job, everything else, the 95% of the task has been achieved. The last 5% is the easy bit. So actually, even if we get to the point where we have the autonomy, there will still need to be some kind of human replacement for the knowledge, the experience, the oversight, and just that person to talk to for the owner. And I'd be very surprised if the owner wants to ever move away totally from that purely to liaising straight with an Apple machine. So whether that pilot sits in the aircraft or on the ground, it's sort of by the by.
And I think you're very right there. Whenever I interview aircrew, the great advantage about being perceived as a relatively low-time chief executive who does fly helicopters and owns a helicopter himself is that the perception is that when you walk into the room and you talk about a job with me and my chief pilot, from my point of view, the given is that you can fly a helicopter. I'm not remotely actually that interested in what you've done in the past, because your CV tells me it anyway. What I'm primarily interested in is, can you communicate with me as an individual? And will you be able to communicate across not just the super high net worth billionaire, but also the positions on board the yacht, which might be perceived as being the lower positions on the vessel. But in fact, if anyone, any positions like a hotel, if the bellboy doesn't do his job, it doesn't matter how good the general manager is. It's the same on a super yacht. You can have the best captains in the world, the best chefs, the best masseurs, but if the deckhands are not keeping the thing clean, then it just reflects on the whole operation. We're part of an integral team which is very broad, and everybody has to be totally engaged with it. And the helicopter pilots need to realise that when they're there. They are there to offer a superb 5-star service which is safe and the client is happy with. And they're also there to support anybody on the boat that needs help.
That's great.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. Any questions? All right, a really simple one for you guys. How will airspace regulation need to evolve to new users like Uber? And you've got 5 seconds each. Or less.
I think it's going to start as optionally piloted. I think that's the only way.
A very narrow corridor in terms of altitudes that a little box or whatever, or a person can fly within.
Great. Any other questions from the floor? Uber Elevate is aiming to be flying air taxi by 2023. Definitely not for high net worth billionaires, but any thoughts?
Good luck to them. I mean, there are a lot of steps for us to go to that. I don't know what the definition of Uber Elevate is to flying taxis. Is it, are they talking parcels? Are they talking, what are they talking about? So frankly, there's a lot of pieces. We have to be realistic about this. Like I said, the urban air mobility of today and in 3 years' time, we feel is the helicopters. Then scale it up, go 10 years or something like that, then absolutely there is a future for eVTOLs and autonomous flying platforms. That's my take.
I think when you see Richard Branson going into space and a few other very, very high net worths going into space, then you know that there is that adventurism there that will actually take them into areas that some of us might feel a little uncomfortable about. So if you were to ask me if Amazon developed something and Mr. Bezos has put his mind and his money behind it, then he might actually get into it.
All right, thank you very much.